And we are now recording. So first of all, I'd like to do a little bit of review from yesterday, because it's always a good idea to review a couple of minutes before we proceed with new material. Yesterday, I showed this graph. This is the Ebbinghaus learning curve. And this refers to when you hear something or see something, you have immediate recall. So immediately after I say something to you, you can remember exactly what I said. However, as time goes by and the time elapses and you get into a month after having heard something, you're only going to remember about 20% of it. Here's another view of the graph. So after 20 minutes, you'll remember 58% of what you heard. After 6 days, you will remember 25% of what you heard. And after 31 days, 21%. So that's why you're going to find that we repeat things in this course, and we repeat things in the webinar that are in the Canvas platform as well, because it's important to repeat for certainty and repeat for understanding, and to repeat it so that it sinks into your brain and sinks into your memory banks. So I just wanted to go over that little slide. You can look him up on the internet. Ebbinghaus, that's his name. He was a German scientist in the 1800s and did these studies about memory and retention. So you can look him up on the internet and read a bit more about him if you want. So that was one thing I wanted to go over. The next thing I wanted to remind you about is the first assignment. Your foundation essay. I'll go to the Canvas platform in just a moment, and I'll show you again where this assignment is located, because there's only one spot where you can find it on the Canvas platform. And I did my essay. I chose topic number 8, and I did my essay on that. So I wrote 3 pages of this essay. It's supposed to be between 2 and 5 pages long. So don't overwrite it, don't overthink it. It is not a formal research paper, so you don't need to have references or a bibliography. But you want to set it up with an introduction, a main body text, and a summary or conclusion at the end of it. And you notice I don't have a bibliography here because it's not required with this particular essay. So choose that topic and choose it soon, because that essay will be due in a couple of weeks' time. Now, where you find that assignment on the Canvas platform, if you go under modules and scroll down to second language acquisition, open second language acquisition, and then scroll down again, and you'll come to assignment 1. So this is where the 8 topics are listed. You choose one of these 8 topics and you write your essay about it, and then you send it into info@tesolcanada.org. In the subject line, put Foundation Essay 1. That helps them to keep the emails organized when they receive all the emails. They receive thousands of emails every day, and they need to keep them organized according to the participant's name and what the email is about. So be sure to identify your email properly so that it doesn't get lost out in cyberspace somewhere. So that's your first assignment. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. And then I did want to do a quick little review of this PowerPoint that we looked at yesterday. So the receptive and productive skills. Which two are receptive? And then, of course, my next question is which two are productive skills?
Listening is receptive, and
That's correct. Listening is receptive. We're
the
hearing
grammar
things.
is receptive. When you explain a lesson to students, students are the receptive for the instructions and for the grammar rules. They receive the information.
When the students are listening or hear something, they are receiving information.
Yeah.
What is the other way we receive information?
When we get feedback from others, from
Sure,
the teacher.
yes, that's true. But which one of these other words is a receptive skill?
Reading.
Is speaking receptive or productive?
No, it's productive.
Correct. What about writing? Is that productive or
Productive.
receptive?
Productive.
Correct. So what about reading?
It's both. No? It's actually receptive because students learn about different cultures and through the reading.
Yes, so listening and reading are the two receptive skills out of the list, and speaking and writing are the productive skills.
Yeah.
Speech and sound includes initiating sound, speaking categories, tones, intonations, and accents, just like piano keys with music.
Yeah.
The receiver is processing an image and relating it to a meaning, just like reacting to music, happy music or mood changes.
Yeah.
A monologue could be planned with no redundancy or unplanned with more redundancy. So this monologue that I'm providing to you right now, would you say this is planned or unplanned?
Planned.
Yes, that's correct, Karen. It's planned because I'm working with a PowerPoint.
Yes.
And I was working ahead of time to prepare what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's correct. Very good. So with a monologue, one must process long stretches of speech without an interruption. Dialogue could be interpersonal, which is social. It could be transactional, which is factual. It might be unfamiliar, where you add references, or it might be a familiar, subject that you are you know a lot about it and you're able to talk about it quite easily. Second language learners need paying attention to the actual information, the factual information. The kinds of listening performances are reactive, listening to the surface structure of an utterance; intensive, focusing on certain components of the discourse; responsive, eliciting immediate response from the learners; selective, scanning the material for specific information; extensive, developing a top-down global understanding of the utterance; or interactive, including all of the above as students actively participate in discussions, debates, conversations, role play, etc. Teaching listening comprehension. In an interactive, developed listening comprehension competence, techniques should be intrinsically motivating. They should appeal to listeners. The techniques should utilize authentic language and context, use real-world tasks, and carefully consider the form of the listener's responses to assess their comprehension. Encourage the development of listening strategies such as the following: looking for key words, looking for nonverbal cues to meaning, predicting a speaker's purpose by the context of the spoken discourse, guessing at meanings, seeking clarification, and listening for the general gist. Bottoms-up and top-down listening techniques. Include both bottoms-up and top-down listening techniques. Bottom-up processing proceeds from sounds to words to grammatical relationships to lexical meanings, etc., to a final message. Top-down processing is evoked from a bank of prior knowledge and expectations, a general look. Would you say this PowerPoint and the way I present, would you say it's a bottoms-up or a top-down process?
No, we have some knowledge and you are focusing on our knowledge. I mean, we are teachers, right? So we have background. Because this is an advanced course.
Well, many of your teachers, not everybody has been a teacher like you and I have been, Sahar.
Oh, okay.
So you
then,
are correct. If you're a teacher taking this course and you have teaching experience, you could definitely say that it's a top-down process,
yeah,
because you have prior knowledge of the topic, of the subject. But for some of the participants, it's a bottom-up process primarily because they're just learning the material for the first time. Native language. These are factors that affect the oral communication skills. Native language. The sound system is the mother tongue will affect the sounds that the students produce when speaking English. The age. Children under the age of puberty stand a chance of sounding like a native speaker in the target language. English is what we're dealing with as the target language. And children under the age of puberty will become more native sounding than adults often do. And let's just talk about the topic of an accent. When an adult person learns a new language, very often their native tongue accent carries over into the new language. And there's nothing wrong with having an accent when you're learning a new language. There's nothing wrong with that at all. As long as you're able to be understood and you speak clearly, and that's where enunciation, very clear speaking of the words that you're using, is crucial to understanding. If you slur your words together and do not speak clearly, then you will not be understood. If you're not understood, then people will say, well, you're not a very good communicator. That might not be true. You might be an excellent communicator, but if you slur your words together and the sounds blend together, people just won't be able to understand what you're saying. So you
The
need to make sure
intonation
that
here, the intonation is also important
that's true. Yes,
because some people, I mean, they say a declarative sentence in a way as if it's a question. So you feel confused. Are they questioning you or they are just stating a declarative sentence? So the intonation is very important here in understanding the meaning of the message.
that's right. And clear enunciation of words helps people to understand what is being said better.
True.
And the exposure, the quality and intensity of exposure are greater than the entire time, the entire length of time. Innate vocal ability. Some people manifest a phonetic coding ability. They are more attuned to learning a new language than other people are. Identity and language ego. One's attitude towards speakers of the target language. Motivation and concern for proper pronunciations. The motivation will strongly influence their results. There are 6 types of listening performances listed in a previous slide: reactive, intensive, selective, extensive, and interactive. It's the same for speaking. Imitation is performed not for the purpose of meaningful interaction, but for focusing on some particular element of language, such as drills. Intensive. This goes one step beyond the imitative to include any speaking performance designed to practice some phonological or grammatical aspect of the language. Responsive. These are short replies, not dialogues. Transactional. Exchanging specific information as an extended form of responsive. Interpersonal or dialogue is primarily for the purpose of maintaining social relationships. Extensive reading is for pleasure, enjoyment. Intensive reading has a purpose, such as studying or preparing research. There are communicative versus academic reading. So emails and memos are communicative. Academic reading is textbook or study modules. So what is the Canvas platform? Is it communicative or academic?
Academic.
That's right, exactly. And reading out loud is a very good way to practice pronunciation versus reading silently, which is primarily to gain a meaning, an understanding of the meaning of a passage that you're looking at. Academic reading structures are comprised of an introduction, the main body of the text, and a conclusion or summary. You can use discourse markers, structures such as first, second, next, in addition to, or furthermore. And other discourse markers are connecting words. However, alternatively, or therefore, as examples. Academic reading tasks. You can have pre-reading strategies where the students are reading before a new lesson, and that helps you to establish the level of their reading ability. You can have during reading strategies where discourse markers and connective words are identified by the student. You can have students respond to comprehension questions, similar to IELTS reading tasks. Authentic texts from college studies. Integration of in your lesson plan. I don't know if any of you have ever taken the IELTS exam.
The TOEFL is the same, no?
The TOEFL?
Yeah, I mean, it has a reading as well.
They're very similar.
Yeah. I mean, students should know, like, if you ask about the opinion of the writer, they should look at the conclusion. If you want to know the idea about the paragraph, you look at the topic sentence. So students should know where to locate the answers in the text.
That's true. Yes, that's right.
If you want to introduce a new idea, also you introduce it in the conclusion and not in the introduction. Where if you want to find the main idea of the whole topic, you find it in the introduction.
That's correct. Yep, that's a very good description.
And this is applied in writing as well, not only reading.
Yes, very true. That's good. Thank you, Sahar.
Okay.
So there's added speed reading or skimming of the text. You can guess the meaning of a text or a word. There is implied meaning and discourse, and there is the purpose of the reading or the text. With silent readings, you have intensive for content, which is bottom up, and extensive, which is scanning top down process. Writing, communicative, and academic. Under academic, you have process writing, which is pre-writing strategies or brainstorming. You have writing for formulating ideas, review, and self-editing. And you have post-writing strategies for editing, rephrasing, change of orders, composition, rewriting, conclusion, etc. Under the text structure, you have the introduction, the main points, and then the conclusion. With writing assessment, it works best with authentic material and integrated with the lesson plan. Can somebody describe what do we mean by authentic material?
It means you don't take it from online.
Well, you
It should
could
be your
actually
own writing.
you could take authentic material from online.
I mean, you have to put a reference.
Yes,
No?
you do need a reference, but what can you give me an example of authentic material?
Like reports, no? Researches.
Reports and research?
Yeah.
They could be. Yes, they could be. The example I used yesterday was if you were teaching a class of business owners who sell electronic equipment,
Mm-hmm.
then the operation manual for the electronic equipment could be the authentic material
Yeah.
that you present to the classroom.
I forgot about this.
The different types of writing are self-writing, display writing, real writing, academic writing, vocational writing, personal writing, and intensive or controlled writing, which is guided and directed. And that's the end of that PowerPoint. I have a different PowerPoint that has been created by another instructor at TESOL. Her name is Anna Patricia. She sometimes teaches some of these webinars. I don't know if she'll be teaching any of your webinars, but she often does teach the webinars. So this is about first and second language acquisition. With first language acquisition, understanding how the first language is acquired is of great importance for foreign language teachers. When does language and communication begin? Reduplication is a morphological process in which word, stem, or root is doubled. This process takes place in two major types: total reduplication and partial reduplication. Total reduplication doubles the entire word, such as boo-boo, bye-bye, knock-knock, night-night, no-no. Partial reduplication copies some phonological features of the word. Stay root, easy peasy, hanky panky, hocus pocus.
The second part.
Sorry, the second part, what?
Of the word. I mean, like easy peasy, the C part. Hanky panky, the T part.
That's right.
Not the whole word, not the whole word.
That's right, just part of it.
Part of it, yeah.
With reduplication, as you may have experienced already, small children understand a great deal of speech before they produce their first word. My son, who is now 30 years old, when he was very young, 3 or 4 years old, he had not said anything yet. And we wondered if he had a learning disability, that he wasn't understanding speech or he wasn't learning how to say words. We didn't know what was going on. And at the time, we would often take him in the car when we would go through the Tim Hortons drive-through. And I would always order 2 coffees, double. One day we pulled up to the drive-through window, and before I could say anything, my son chimed out from the back seat, 2 coffees, double. So we knew that he had no problem. I agree, Karen. We laughed pretty hard too. And the Tim Hortons person at the window laughed pretty hard, I'll tell you. But we realized he didn't have any difficulty understanding anything at all. He was just waiting for the right time to produce the speech. So it's an interesting process to observe.
some kids, when they are exposed to different languages at the same time, they'll take more time to process the languages, because they have to make their own system of the sounds, and then later on they start producing the language.
Yes, that's right. The main function of reduplication of simple syllables is the process of acquiring meaningful words in order to enable the child to produce polysyllabic utterances without articulating complex structures. And these are the references that she gives for that thought. Telegraphic speech. Telegraphic speech is a concise message characterized by the use of 3-word short phrases or sentences made up of main content words such as nouns and verbs, and void of function words and grammatical morphemes such as articles, example the and a, auxiliaries or modals, example is, are, can, or prepositions, example in or on. Why telegraphic speech is important for development: to communicate thoughts and feelings, thus avoiding frustration, to share their experiences, experiment with sentence structure. First, language acquisition. It appears that to acquire language, the child must pass through various stages, not proceeding to the next stage until the previous stage is learned. Some claim that if any of these points in development are missed, the child is never able to go back and learn in the same way. The ability to acquire language rapidly deteriorates once at the puberty age. Language seems to parallel other developments in children, both motor and intellectual. As in these skills, once developed, it will continue developing naturally if no disaster intervenes. Child language acquisition. It is the field that studies cases of mother tongue acquisition. From the University of Sheffield in 2015, a study was done there. Behavioral theory assumes that children imitate what they hear, and thanks to continuous positive reinforcement, children learn language through conditioning and habit formation. From a study by Lanier in 2011. Stages of first language development. Are you able to read that chart?
Yeah.
You can read it okay? All right. So in the very earliest ages, 0 to 2 months, crying expresses hunger and discomfort. 2 to 4 months, cooing noises express satisfaction or pleasure. 4 to 9 months, babbling, gurgling, and changing to echolalic babbling, such as gaga, mama, mama. At 9 to 18 months, one-word utterances refer to people and objects in the baby's life, such as juice or mama. At 18 months to 2.5 years, 2-word utterances, the beginning of syntax, expanding to 3-word utterances, allows for more communicative functions: commenting, negating, requesting, and questioning. More juice, juice fall down, daddy go. At 2.5 years, the telegraphic speech as expanded syntax and vocabulary, omits key grammatical markers and function words. I eated bread. We've all heard young children say things such as that.
Yeah.
Instead of I ate bread, I eated bread, because they don't have the understanding
The grammar.
of the different contexts of verbs. Here's a teacher tip: the behaviorist theory of second language acquisition video. It's an interesting video to watch. I can't get the link to work here on the slide for you. I've tried it before, it won't work. But you can just make a note of this title and you can put it into your YouTube search bar and you can look that video up. It's an interesting video and helps you understand behaviorist theory of second language acquisition. And that is the correct ending to the link. Fro is the ending of the link. So if you're copying that link down, just copy it exactly as you see it right there, and you'll be fine. Okay, everybody get that? The classical conditioning of second language acquisition. In the psychological sense, learning is understood as an observable change in performance on the part of an individual. Whether this change in performance is for better or worse is not involved in the definition. Creative learning. Another view of language learning, which has become most widely accepted in modern times, admits the role of habit formation, but sees learning as much more than that. A living language. Living language is one that the student learns to think in it. Words allow us to represent nonverbal concepts and to deal abstractly with experiences. Motivation. Motivation plays a vital part in the acquisition of a second language. This involves a positive attitude towards the people whose language is to be learned, especially when acquiring a good accent. Watch. The nature of human language is still not completely understood. Do infants learn language? How do infants learn language? How does it fit in with other cognitive processes? Noam Chomsky, the noted linguist, philosopher, and social critic, explores the complexities of language and its study. Just a little note about Noam Chomsky. When you're looking up your first essay assignment, your foundation essay assignment under second language acquisition on the modules of the Canvas platform, you open up the second language acquisition, and there's a video there of Noam Chomsky presenting a lecture a number of years ago. You should definitely listen to that video. He's a brilliant linguist and scientist and a psychologist, a behavioral and language acquisition specialist. And his study of the complexities of language and how it all works is absolutely fascinating. Excellent video. He's a very good speaker. It's quite a long video, so set aside a good hour of your time to watch it. And when I was studying the course, I watched that video half a dozen times because it was so good. And it definitely will help you understand more about language acquisition theory. Oh, there he is right there.
First question always is, can you hear me in the back? Yeah, okay. Actually, a week ago, I thought Mother Nature was gonna continue with her antics and I'd have to come next spring, but you made it.
Now I've lost the slide presentation.
First question always is, can you hear me in the back? Yeah, okay. Actually, first question always is, Mother Nature was gonna continue with her.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to open up that PowerPoint again and find my spot. I pressed the button to move to the next slide and it took me to the YouTube channel with Noam Chomsky on it. Just give me a moment to get back there. And now I can't even seem to open the slide presentation up. Well,
Sorry, Dana, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you, Isa.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do we have access to these recordings later? Like the specific recordings that we're doing in class right now?
I couldn't understand your question, sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I could not
Yeah,
understand your words.
So the question was, can we have access to these recordings after the class? Did you hear my question?
The recordings are put up onto the TESOL Canada YouTube channel.
I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it this morning, so I'll just check again.
I'll show you where that is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Under announcements and up on the Canvas platform, under the announcements tab,
Yeah.
go to open the announcements tab and scroll down to Canada training videos. TESOL Canada training videos.
Okay.
Open that. And then here's the link to the YouTube channel. And once you're inside here, you have lots of recordings of previous sessions.
Yeah, so I've gone through that process previously, but the question was whether this specific session that we're having right now, are we able to view them later? Because this seems to be dating back to a couple of years ago.
Well, today's session will be up on the YouTube channel but it always takes them a few days before they're able to upload
Okay.
it.
Okay, I see. Because I was looking for the session from yesterday and I couldn't come across it, but it makes sense now. So that's okay. Thank you.
Well, it's too soon for yesterday to be up.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's clear now.
But here's the very first session from September of 2023. So as I mentioned yesterday, if you listen to the first session from 2023,
Mm.
or you listen to yesterday's recording, they're going to be very similar.
Okay.
They won't be identical because, of course, I'm not working from a script. I'm just giving the presentation as I come to it. But you're able to see the first session going back several years.
Okay.
And you can
Excellent.
listen
No.
to any of those.
Yep.
And they will all be very similar.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. So here's me giving the very first lecture for a series that was, this is from a class done several years ago. I'm not even sure what the year was.
1 year ago.
2022, I think. So that's where you find it, Isa.
Okay. Perfect. Understood. I was actually just a little bit maybe curious to know whether it get updated automatically, but it's okay. I'll go through the previous videos. That would be fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm having difficulty getting that other PowerPoint presentation back. I might have it now. Can you see the slides of the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so there's 6 stages of second language acquisition. One is pre-production. This is also called the silent period, when the student takes in the new language but does not speak it. This period often lasts 6 weeks or longer, depending on the individual. The second stage is early production. The individual begins to speak using short words and sentences, but the emphasis is still on listening and absorbing the new language. There will be many errors in the early production stage. The next stage is called speech emergent. Speech becomes more frequent. Words and sentences are longer, but the individual still relies heavily on context clues and familiar topics. Vocabulary continues to increase and errors begin to decrease, especially in common or related interactions. The beginning of fluency. Speech is fairly fluent in social situations with minimal errors. New contexts and academic language are challenging, and the individual will struggle to express themselves due to gaps in vocabulary and appropriate phrases. Communicating, the intermediate fluency stage is communicating in the second language as fluent, especially in social language situations. The individual is capable of speaking. The individual is able to speak almost fluently in new situations or in academic areas, but there will be gaps in vocabulary, knowledge, and some unknown expressions. There are very few errors now, and the individual is able to demonstrate higher order thinking skills in the second language, such as offering an opinion or analyzing a problem. With advanced fluency, the individual communicates fluently in all contexts and can maneuver successfully in new contexts and when exposed to new academic information. At this stage, the individual may still have an accent and use idiomatic expressions incorrectly at times, but the individual is essentially fluent and comfortable communicating in the second language. Stephen Krashen's theory of second language acquisition. In the Canvas modules, right after your foundation assignment, your foundation essay assignment, you will see a video about Stephen Krashen's approach to second language acquisition. It's a very good video, and you should watch it as well. Stephen Krashen from the University of Southern California is an expert in the field of linguistics, specializing in theories of language acquisition and development. The summary of Krashen's theory of second language acquisition is that this theory consists of 5 main hypotheses. Number 1, the acquisition learning hypothesis. Number 2, the monitor hypothesis. Number 3, the input hypothesis. Number 4, the affective filter hypothesis. And number 5, the natural order hypothesis. The acquisition learning distinction is the most important of the 5 hypotheses in Krashen's theory and is the most widely known and influential among linguists and language teachers. English language teaching in the postmodern era toward better diagnosis, treatment, and assessment by Douglas Brown. He developed 12 principles, outlined 12 principles. Acquisition, example 1, walking. No one teaches the child to walk, but he's able to walk as a normal child. Learning, example, reading. If a child is not taught to read, he is not able to read. So that's the end of that PowerPoint presentation. And now I want to go back to the module section on Canvas. And we're going to look specifically at methodologies. The methodologies in sentence transformation. And we're looking at grammar translation and direct method. The grammar translation method. For many centuries, the grammar translation method was the means by which people would learn a new language, a second language, or a third or a fourth language. So if we think back to the medieval days in Europe with priests and monks in monasteries, they were copying the texts from the original Greek. They were copying them into Latin, which was used by the Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. And the way they would do that would be simply to copy the letters and copy the words and phrases. They were not communicating, they were not speaking. They were just copying the shapes of the letters. And some of those monks and priests would spend a lifetime copying out texts from literary sources. One of the main sources being the early Bible, and they created many manuscripts, which were often illuminated illustrated with pictures and illuminated with gold leaf. And they would illustrate the stories that they were doing the writing of. But they were not learning to speak the new language. They were just copying it out and writing it. That process, that style of learning a new language, continued on until the 18th century. And the classical method, which it was also known as, classical method, was adopted by many educational institutions, especially in Europe, until the 19th century. And at that point in time, a new method called the direct method came along. The direct method at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, so the turn of the 20th century, became widely used. And the direct method is very much like the manner in which young babies learn their first language. It's very, very much a direct learning process. So with direct method, the classroom instruction is conducted exclusively in the target language. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences were taught. Oral communication around question and answer exchanges occurred between teachers and students in small intensive classes. Grammar was taught inductively, so they didn't hand out drills and pages of exercises. They taught it inductively by the students hearing it. They would learn it. New teaching points were taught through modeling and practice. Concrete vocabulary was taught through demonstration, objects and pictures. The association of ideas was used to teach abstract vocabulary. Both speech and listening comprehension were taught. Excuse me. Emphasis was placed on correct pronunciation and grammar. The direct method enjoyed considerable popularity until the end of the 19th century and well into the 20th century. It was most widely accepted in private language schools where students were highly motivated and where native-speaking teachers could be employed. So if you think about the geography in Europe, the countries are very close together. So if you had students in one country learning a language from the next country beside it, they were very close to each other. It was easy to bring a teacher from the second language country to teach that language in the home country. Whereas in the United States or Canada, because the countries are so large, there wasn't the same need for second language acquisition or second language learning. The speaking of English as the dominant language was the only language that was necessary for communication. A gentleman by the name of Charles Berlitz was a big proponent of the direct method. However, he chose to call it the Berlitz method, of course, naming it after himself. It's an imitation of the natural process, known as the direct method. So, you know, for the purposes of your exam and assignments, you can refer to direct method and Berlitz method. You can refer to them interchangeably because essentially they're the same thing. By the end of the 20th century, the use of the direct method had declined both in Europe and in the United States. Most language curricula returned to grammar translation method or to a reading approach that emphasized reading skills in foreign languages. However, interestingly enough, by the middle of the 20th century, the direct method was revived and redirected into what was probably the most visible of all language teaching revolutions in the modern era, the audiolingual method. Why do you think the direct method declined in the first quarter of the 20th century? Why do you think they would have returned to grammar translation method? In the United States and Europe, think of the first part of the 20th century. Think of it economically. The direct method, which relied on smaller class sizes, was more expensive to run in a school.
Look, the classroom, we have few students. It was expensive.
Yes, that's right. Direct method was too expensive to continue running. The grammar translation method was a cheaper method because there could be one teacher and many students, and they would hand out practice drills, and the students would fill out the paperwork and hand it back in. And the marking, the assessment was very easy to do because the teacher just had to mark the pages. And they would have a marking sheet they would refer to and compare the students' questions. So they were able to have a less expensive process with the grammar translation method.
May I ask a question, please?
Certainly. Go ahead, Sahar.
The methodologies that we are studying now are usually assessed through the essays we do only, right? Or do we have a quiz in these and we have to memorize them?
You will use you'll discuss these methodologies in various assignments that you write.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any questions in the quizzes at the end of the modules. I can't
And
remember.
how about the exam, the midterm exam and the final?
On the exam, there probably will be questions where you have to explain what is this methodology about, or
Yeah.
what is that methodology about. So you should have a good understanding of each methodology.
And
Yes,
the keywords, we should learn the definitions and know how to answer them.
correct.
Okay.
So when we get into the early part of the 20th century, the 1930s and 1940s, what happened? What big world event occurred in the 1930s?
Is it the World War?
Yes, the Second World War. That's exactly
Yeah.
right, Karen. And in the Second World War, during that time, the United States was sending soldiers overseas
Yeah.
into foreign countries, and they were teaching the soldiers how to speak the languages of those countries they were sending them to.
This is the army method.
That's correct. The nickname for audiolingual, the nickname is the common name for it is the Army method, because the Army was training the soldiers to speak in those other languages. A lot of those soldiers were going over to foreign countries as spies, and they were infiltrating the enemy behind the enemy lines, and they needed to be able to speak the foreign languages very clearly,
Like the native speakers.
like a native speaker. That's correct, Sahar. And if they were not able to speak like a native speaker,
They will
then
know that.
they were at risk of being arrested and executed for being a spy. So they had to be able to speak the language extremely well.
Yeah.
The audiolingual method focuses on communication and absolutely perfect pronunciation. So that when they're teaching the audiolingual method, the teacher will say words or phrases or sentences, and the students, the participants, just repeat what the teacher said, and they learn it by repetition.
Mhm.
So this is where, you know, when before we began the class today, Sahar and I were having a conversation, and she was saying that you know, here in Canada we use songs such as "Old MacDonald Had a Farm," E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a horse, E-I-E-I-O. And here a horse, there a horse. So the repetition of those words, the repetition of those sounds are copied by the students. And that's how they learn the language, and they learn to speak as a native speaker would speak. And it was very effective.
When they like it, they cannot forget. Army.
Right, so that's the Army method. They use a lot of oral activity pronunciation pattern drills and conversation practice with virtually none of the grammar and translation found in traditional classes. So the grammar translation method is out the window with this Army method, this audiolingual method.
Even the native speakers, they often don't pay attention to grammar.
I'm sorry, they all did what?
The native speakers, they often speak language without paying attention to grammatical rules. They just speak it fluently.
Well, you are absolutely correct. And the interesting thing about that is, for me personally, when I was in elementary school, the school systems decided that grammar rules were no longer important to be taught to students. So we didn't have grammar lessons. We didn't learn a lot of the grammar rules when I was in school.
Yeah, it's the same thing with us as foreigners. If for example, my native language is Arabic, so even if we learn the grammar at school, we don't remember it now because we just speak fluently and we don't need the grammar.
That's right. And so the interesting thing for me is a lot of you you participants, a lot of students in these TESOL classes know more about English grammar rules than I do.
That's true because we teach English for academic purposes. We have to
That's
teach
right.
the grammar.
That's right. And even though I speak English fluently, I mean, it's my first language. I grew up speaking English, but I don't know all the grammar rules like you do. So while the audiolingual method was a valued attempt to reap the fruits of language teaching methodologies that had preceded it, in the end, it still fell short, as all methods do. But we learned something from the very failure of the ALM to do everything it had promised, and we moved forward. While the innovative methods of the 1970s were either touted or criticized by many, some paramount foundations for future growth were being laid in what soon came to be known as the Notional Functional Syllabus, NFS. Beginning with the work of the Council of Europe and later followed by numerous interpretations of notional syllabuses, notional functional syllabuses had started to be used in the United Kingdom in the 1970s. The distinguishing characteristics of the NFS were its attention to functions as the organizing elements of English language curriculum and its contrast with the structural syllabus in which sequenced grammatical structures served as the organizers. Reacting to methods that attended too vigorously to grammatical form, the NFS sought to focus sharply and in some of its interpretations exclusively on the practical purposes to which we put language. As such, it was not a method at all. It was close to what we have already described as an approach, but it was more specifically focused on curricular structure than an appropriate approach would be. Notions, according to Van Eck and Alexander in 1980, were both general and precise. General notions are abstract concepts such as existence, space, time, quantity, and quality. They are domains in which we use language to express thought and feeling. Within the general notion of space and time, for example, are the concepts of location, motion, dimension, speed, the length of time, frequency, etc. Specific notions correspond more closely to what we have become accustomed to calling contexts or situations. Personal identification, for example, is a specific notion under which name, address, and phone number and other personal information are subsumed. Other specific notions include travel, health and welfare, education, shopping, services, and free time. The functional part of the notional functional syllabus corresponds to language functions. Curricula are organized around such functions as identifying, reporting, denying, accepting, declining. Excuse me. I must be allergic to myself. Declining, asking permission, apologizing, etc. Van Eck and Alexander in 1980 list some 70 different language functions. We're certainly not going to go through all 70 of them, but these are a few of the main categories: introductions, greetings and goodbyes, invitations, apologies and condolences, gratitude, compliments, congratulations, requests, commands, warnings, directions, others, seeking permissions, etc., etc. And I'll let you read the rest of the list on the Canvas platform. By attending to the functional purposes of language and providing contextual notional settings for the realization of those purposes, it provided a link between a dynasty of methods that were now perishing and a new era of language teaching called communicative language teaching, CLT. These are some excellent videos that demonstrate the different language approaches. And if you have a chance, watch these videos. They're definitely helpful to understand and help you to remember the key details of the different language acquisition methods. Okay, so we're almost out of time for today. That's the end of the presentations for today's lecture. Does anybody have any questions before we say goodbye? Issa, do you have a question?
Sorry?
Do you have a question?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
No? No questions? You're a very smart group of people.
I already read them before the explanation, so I have some information.
Well, that's good.
Be prepared. Be prepared.
Okay, so we're going to say goodbye then. We're going to call it the end of today's session. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.